So my name is Jeremy Drucker. I'm the Executive Director and Editor-in-Chief at Transitions. If you don't know us, we are a Prague-based media development organization that publishes an online magazine called Transitions as well, covering Central and Eastern Europe. And then we also run a lot of journalism training across Central and Eastern Europe. And this webinar is part of a program that started last week with a webinar on covering COVID-related disinformation. We're continuing with solutions journalism today, and then that will be followed by several more hands-on workshops. But we're very happy to have you here today. I wanted to also introduce my colleague, Lucia Cherna, who will be co-hosting this webinar, and also Nicole Eli, who is helping us on the technical side and also to field any questions you have. So I think with that, I'll probably hand it over to Lucy, and then as you will see, we'll be flipping back and forth throughout the next hour, but very happy to have you here with us.
So hello once more. Let's start briefly with the objectives of this 1.5 hour roughly. What we are up to this time. We will try to make it clear and define what is solutions journalism, and also what it isn't, which usually helps as well to actually make clear what it is. We will look together at some examples using the 4 criteria, especially in the COVID-19 coverage. And we will try to show you how to identify a solutions angle for your story and how to look for solution stories. If you have any questions meanwhile, then anytime you can ask a question in the chat and Nicole will raise this up for us. So, solutions journalism, what it actually is, it's usually useful to start with a definition. This is the definition by Solutions Journalism Network, a wonderful organization that's based in New York. And we use a lot of their methodology and tools because they are simply great. So solutions journalism is rigorous, evidence-based reporting on existing responses. And those 3 magical words are really key to the definition. It's not fluff, it's not feel-good news, and it's not positive news. It's really rigorous, say, investigative reporting about what is already now happening in the world. So it's not about future, it's not about good intentions, it's about what is out there in the world, and you as reporters are bearing witness. And you are also basing it in evidence. You are really looking for impact of that. So that's what it actually is. So shall we stop now? Okay, let's get a bit in depth. Médiacités is a wonderful initiative that's exactly focusing on what is the difference between how we perceive world and what is the actual state of it based on data, on official data. In fact, there were 13 questions, and in fact, all of the areas that were covered there, with the exception of one, which is climate change, where we are not doing better. In the all the others, actually, we are improving. It's far from perfect. It's definitely not solved. But the situation is actually, or at least the data shows that the situation is improving. Be it sanitation, be it access to education, access to water, whatever. Yeah, and again, in climate change, we are not performing very well. So this is really like getting rather worse. But the fact is that people tend to have maybe, and it's probably quite natural, we tend to be skeptical. And don't worry, journalists are those who are actually performing worst in this test. The Gapminder initiative did also test with chimpanzees, and actually they did perform better than journalists. They were just randomly pushing the answers, and journalists were more skeptical than actually any of the groups, which is not a surprise, right? Because you are trained to be skeptical, and you are trained to be like not to jump on every good news. On the other hand, imagine what kind of, if you as a journalist have such a perception of world, so what kind of picture you are actually passing to your readers. The problem is that that day by day we are actually receiving our daily dose of bad news. Especially now, this is just a random sample of coverage from across Central and Eastern Europe, and those messages are actually overwhelming us. And I don't know whether you, but I really experienced that with COVID, but also with other reporting before, that simply enough is enough. And we are having a threshold where we can actually not bear anymore. And we start tune out. And this is actually, very, very problematic thing. So I would like to ask you, we tried to do it a bit interactive here. So I would like to ask you to go to this website. Actually, I can share the link with you to the chat. And I would like to ask you to share feelings that you are actually getting when reading news like that, when reading the negativity from your daily perspective. So what do we see? So we see sadness, fear, terrible, irritating, panic, exhaustion, fatal, frustration. Exactly, those are feelings. And I think, yes, sadness is actually all the covering word here. So there is no wonder that this is actually only you, but this is natural effect on everyone. So this is actually based in data as well. Reuters Institute did actually several reports after each other, brought the information about reasons for news avoidance. People simply start avoiding news, and when asked about the reasons, about 1/3 of people actually avoid news. And then asking about the reasons, the number one was, it can have negative effect on my mood. Number two was, I can't rely on news to be true, so I simply don't know whether it's true or not. And also the interesting one is the third one, I don't feel there is anything I can do about it. And those are things that actually are causing a lot of frustration and a lot of fear. So why should I actually do this to myself if I can watch next Netflix movie or series and do something else that actually doesn't have such a negative impact on my mood? This is actually a global trend. On the right side of the screen, you can see that this is, and unfortunately, this seems to be a rising trend, that people simply tune out from news coverage. And it's actually a big problem that plays together with all the other troubles today's media are facing. So what can be done about this? Or what is the reason first? What is the reason about it? And then maybe I was talking too much. So back to Jeremy, and let's focus on why is this?
Okay, thank you. So I'll try to move through this rather quickly, but I think, I would hope, most of you know journalism's normal theory of change. So traditionally, the media performs a watchdog role, right? So the media is meant to be watching what the government is doing, what business is doing, how society is acting, and to report what's going wrong. with the hope that people will respond, whether government will fix the problem or the public will rise up and get angry about the problem. We all know that that doesn't always happen. It very often leads to additional frustration, additional sadness, and simply trying to figure out how change can really happen in a world where problems are reported, but then nothing ends up changing. Can you, yeah, thank you. So solutions journalism is all about going from this typical model of watchdog to guide dog. So the journalist's role is not only to point out problems and hope something happens, but also to portray solutions, or maybe better said, responses to problems that seem to be working somewhere and could inspire people. So the goal is to create this kind of light at the end of the tunnel here, which, as we can see, the news often does not evoke. So it's very much about giving a much fuller picture of how society works, where it's not just only problems out there, but it's also solutions. This is a quote here from Tina Rosenberg, one of the co-founders of the Solutions Journalism Network. And maybe I'll just read it very quickly, but she says, you can't just cover problem after problem, lead people into despair and passivity and wave goodbye. You owe the audience more than that. Solutions journalism is showing that there are people responding to problems and there are things that are working. This is especially important. I think many of you are from young democracies, if we can call them that, which are going through a lot of growing problems over the last 30 years. And if journalists, especially in these countries, are only showing problems, there's a good chance that many people will simply become frustrated, even with democracy, and think that democracy is not the right system to solve problems, if that's all we see.
Yes. So when Jeremy was talking about the dogs, I would like to stress that we actually need both the dogs. It's not about that the guide dog is replacing the watchdog. We definitely need the watchdog because we need to know what's wrong. But I really believe that this is not where the role of journalism ends. This is basically where next steps needs to be taken to tell the whole story and to deliver useful information for the audiences. So related to coronavirus, we definitely need to know what is wrong and this is happening, right? This is also what media do in the middle of the crisis. They report about the problem and this is this breaking news mode, right? However, so on the left side, there is a typical problem-focused story that names the problem. The thing is that if it's for the 37,000 times, it doesn't really help me again. And this is what people keep complaining so much about media nowadays, that they only report about how many people died, how many people are in hospitals, how many people are now more infected and so on. And this is really, really exhausting for people. Because, okay, good, we acknowledge the problem, we have a problem, but people need to know what can be done about it. And they need useful recipe for themselves, what to do, how to behave, how not to behave, and so on. A very good example of a solution story, which is actually, both of the examples are from Italy, from the spring outbreak when Italy was the first country hit in Europe. It was hit very hardly. There was a lot of dead people and a lot of hospitals that were overwhelmed, and the system was not managing. The capacities were overwhelmed and so on. Traditional journalism brings the information about hospitals in crisis and dead people. However, you can also report, and this is where I again repeat, this is not about good news and fluff news. You can also enter this sad story from a solutions perspective and say, okay, this is how Italy experienced the pandemic. And here are the lessons the rest of the world can learn from them, because they already went through the worst, right? And they also tried to fix it and experienced what's working and what's not working. Those are very valuable lessons, and journalists can play a very important role in investigating them and bringing them back to local audiences, to your own people, to your own communities. So we need both, and actually I think right now we are having way too much of the problem-focused reporting and not so much of the light at the end of the tunnel, and out of this trouble, at least like things that proved to be working so far. So what is the difference in the reporting? Solutions reporting leaves audiences rather inspired than depressed, because the emotion in the end of the story, when I read about lessons from Italy, is totally different than when I read about dead bodies. It's the light at the end of the tunnel Jeremy mentioned. It balances the image of the world. If we look out of the window, despite of the crisis now really going in a full speed across Europe, we still see it's not the end of the world, right? There is life out there, and there are also people that are trying and doing good stuff, but we are not receiving this message. So this brings solutions perspective to the flood of the problem. It balances the media image of the world. And yeah, I already said that it tells the whole story, because the story is not only about the problem, but also about people trying to fix them. David Boardman, who is a very experienced journalist working for decades as editor-in-chief for Seattle Times, said that he sees solutions journalism as next evolutionary stage of journalism. So after investigative journalism, which is taken for like the highest stage of journalism, solution journalism is just the next step to fill the gap and to tell the whole story. If there is one slide you should take away from this webinar today, it's this one. And if you want to take a picture or a screenshot, wait until the end, because there will be 4 qualities, which is kind of a mantra that we actually follow based on the methodology of Solutions Journalism Network, that makes your reporting focused, quality and high quality, and also it's actually a good checklist for any journalism. So, Jeremy, how about explaining the first quality?
Okay, so many stories, as we know, start off often with a person. It's a good way to lead into a story, it gets people interested, and so on. So with solutions journalism, it usually focuses much more on the response to a problem and how it happened. So the stories can lead with a person. We know that's often an interesting way to start your story, but these are not stories about heroes. They are much more about a detailed response to a problem and really working out for people how the solution evolved, how it developed, and how it's working.
Mm-hmm. Number 2 is evidence. Evidence should be basis of every story, but double much so in a solution story, in a story about something that's working. Every statement of success, you should actually ask for evidence. It's not that the leader of the program told you it's working, right? You want to see it's really working. It's really having impact in the real world. So show me data, show me people who would confirm that. Show me impact on people's lives. Show me people who benefit from the program. Show me statistics or statements of public authorities, anything that could actually confirm that this program is not only a good intention, but it actually makes a change. It makes a difference in the world. This is what differs the feel-good story from rigorous reporting. So ask for evidence whenever you are told this is actually working. So the question here to ask is, how do I know it's working? Number 3, Jeremy.
Yes, so as it says here, another quality is seeking to provide teachable lessons. So traditionally, these stories have enough of the details there, enough explanation that can help others actually take that response and adapt it to their own country if they want to. So it's not just inspiration, but really teachable lessons, concrete details about how that particular response can be replicated, adapted, used somewhere else.
And last but not least, and again, the more important in solutions-oriented reporting, you need to discuss limitations of the particular solution you report on, because there is no perfect solution. And every program has its gaps, its weak points, its caveats, and you as a reporter need to show them or discuss them. Not in order to undermine the whole story and undermine the whole program, because you have also evidence of impact, right? But limitations are important for several reasons. First, it increases credibility of your story, because we all know there are no perfect solutions, there is no perfect world, and there is always a catch. If you don't give me the catch in your story, I will assume it anyway, and I might even assume worse. The second reason for limitations, for naming limitations, is if you don't name them, and now limitation might be also things that are in the way of the solution to be scaled up or having better impact or reaching to more people. If you don't name the limitations, there will be no public debate about how to remove them. So your story can actually make the program even, more efficient. And third reason is that if someone gets inspired by your story and says, well, this is really great and this could work in our community too, it's fair to share with them also the troubled points, right? What you need to bear in mind if you want to replicate it. You need to think that, well, maybe financing is not that easy for this issue. Or maybe the qualified personnel is hard to find because you cannot find professionals in this area so easily. Or maybe the solution works for young people, but not for elderly, or it works for city people, but not for those in countryside, or the other way around. So this is something that it's fair to share with your readers or audiences to paint the full picture. And most importantly, discussing limitations protects yourself, protects you from being accused of activism. And this is usually the biggest fear of journalists, that solution journalism is advocacy and that it's actually promotion and activism. If you stick to this 4 criteria, and if you are very thorough about the evidence, and if you are fair naming the limitations, then it's fair reporting, and you are backing yourself from being accused of activism. So you saw that solution story can be done actually about very simple things, and that's actually the magic. That's the key. You need to pick a very concrete thing, and then you can actually analyze it, touch it, and explain it. So this one was about a very simple program about how to find tutors for students in the Corona times. And actually the whole feed is a very good, it's actually this KXAN program. Those are all very short videos about small particular solutions to the situations with the pandemic, because it's not only about the health aspects, right? It's about the education, it's about jobs, it's about safe shopping. It really reaches all the life situations. Good, Jeremy, any comments on that?
No, not really. You captured it at the end. I think it's really important to keep in mind exactly what Lucy said. Sometimes people think when we're talking about solutions journalism and COVID, we're really focusing just on the medical response. But there's so many other layers, as you all know, and we'll get into some of those examples later on. But I think this is a very good example. There's another one, if you watch as well, about a woman who converted a cooking studio or a place where people were going for after school cooking lessons into a place where students could go during COVID and use their laptops. And if they needed advice, they could get that from someone because otherwise they would be at home without parents. Obviously, this is only in countries where people were allowed to get together, but it's another very good example. So I would encourage you to watch these. They're short. They show you can do it in video as well, and they're very powerful.
Yeah. After all, the message of this video was that it was two students who founded this initiative, right? It was not like anything very sophisticated. They just felt the need, the urgency that they are lacking something, and they are trying to fill the gap. Solutions journalism is actually about initiatives that are filling gaps. Usually they are not filling the whole gap at once, but they are actually helping to fill the gap. And you are not looking for the ultimate solution, right? Initiative like that will not solve the problem with distant learning at all, but like in general, but it helps a lot in the particular situation. Okay, if there are no burning questions at the moment, we have asked you to read a story about Denmark and how Denmark actually opened schools quite soon after the lockdown. Did you manage to read that? If not, because I know it was quite a short notice, but I really recommend to read it, and we will go quickly with Jeremy through the basic things that makes this story a solution story. So over to Jeremy. Or maybe still I would stress that this is actually about so the journalist kind of took or made a story or wrote a story about Denmark that was quite efficient in opening the schools in a safe way, and she wanted to highlight the lessons for other countries. That's the mentality she approached the story and the way how she wanted to tell it. So I want to find the lessons for others from this particular strategy. Good, so over to Jeremy.
Yeah, and I would just mention briefly, the local, if you don't know it, they're active in a whole bunch of different European cities and largely targeted toward expats. But obviously, this is a type of story I think would be helpful for anyone. So as we mentioned, one of the key criteria for solutions journalism is to really talk about how the solution works. So I think if you read through this story, you will see a lot of details. You will come away from having read the story and thinking probably how schools in your own country compare to this one, because you really do learn enough. I don't think we have to go through all of these little details. We will send this to you afterwards, but clearly, and it's additionally powerful because the author of the article also has her own children. So this is her own experience that she's going through. And she really says for her experience was in part of the school, she could go inside the building, the other one she couldn't, but that the distances were well marked. In the kindergarten, you can see her 4-year-old couldn't hug or hold hands with their friends, but there were certain things adults could do to comfort them. And then the hygienic rules were very clearly stated in the article, how many times a day or how many times an hour children should be washing their hands. Again, focusing on the distance that was recommended to keep within the school, how they were able to do that, what they did with toys, because that's an obvious question. What do you do with toys, especially for small children? So you would really, as I said, come away from this understanding more or less how the solution works, how the response works. And you get in this way also the personal touch. So I think it's a very powerful way of telling the story, and in much more detail than some other articles you might have seen, which just very briefly ran through the hygienic rules that schools might have and people keeping distance, but you don't really in your mind get an image of how it's done and how it works.
Yeah, I might maybe jump in here quickly. I really want to stress what Jeremy said about the details. I think what makes solutions journalism is that you share these details, because only then, me as a reader, I can imagine how it actually functions in the school. And unfortunately, way too often, stories stay on the surface and they don't do this deep dive. And they only provide a very superficial and actually not concrete information that I cannot picture anything with that. And therefore, I'm not getting the concrete understanding. Actually, this is not a comprehensive list. I think the story is packed with details. This is just a random sample. But you see, it's very based on details. So you need to ask a lot, much more than usually, for how it works.
Yeah, and again, evidence, very, very important to show impact. And as Lucy said before, this is really a way to get, to avoid the critique that what you're doing is advocacy. So the journalist here is making a strong case that the system has worked well in Denmark, but without the evidence, why would we believe her? How would we believe her? Maybe we could think she's biased somehow. Maybe she's got family in the education profession or something. We just don't know. But she does a very good job of placing evidence within the story, because I think the natural response, especially now in the fall, as we've seen in the Czech Republic and elsewhere, when kids have gone back to school, often the infection rates have gone up. So here she's providing a very concrete example of kids going back to school, but the infection rate actually remaining stable, even as the attendance level increased. So again, evidence, 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 very important, especially I would say for those of you who have worked in data journalism, that's a very good asset to have as a solutions journalist as well. You don't have to have that, but it certainly helps, at least knowing how to use numbers. And we'll get into this more later.
Okay. We also touched the teachable lessons and the insights. So what it actually is, it's the information for others. So either for others in that community, but also for other countries or regions, what they can take away from that. This is just, again, and they are very close, they are often close to the house, as we touched on the previous slide, but they are more general. So that's because the how done it is actually how it's done in that particular school that we actually visited with the reporter, right? But then there are some general principles that can be taken away and like kind of distilled from that experience that could be transferable, be it washing hands, or is it installing more hand washing devices, or dividing the space into sections so that groups of kids are not mixing with each other, and so on. That's all teachable lessons for others. So other principals in schools can, for instance, take this and apply that. There are also the aha moments or things that the schools learned on the way. For instance, there is a mention about that the parents were actually confused at the beginning whether the school attendance is obligatory or not, how it works if they don't want to send the kid to the school. So then the authority later clarified with the parents. Those are also aha moments on the way, because those experiences that you do or you make on the way from, like, we have gone a journey, right? And you are taking a lot of lessons. And this is what you can share with others, because if it was a painful lesson, then you can save this pain to others, or at least you can prepare them for that. Maybe things are not always that easy, and you need to adjust. You need to change your strategy. You need to change your attitude. You need to change your approach. And also this is useful for others. So this teachable lessons. So aha moments, we realized that. And then limitations, as I mentioned already, very important. So also this is not perfect, right? So parents were afraid. They didn't want their kids to be, or some of them didn't want their kids to be guinea pigs. They were afraid that it might not be safe enough. They were worried of when the school actually limited the distance from 2 meters to 1 meter. And also it mentions that, well, the principals are, or the management of the school is getting emails every evening about new procedures because this is changing constantly. And it's very stressful for the staff as well, not only for the kids or the parents. So it's not perfect, but it's working somehow. And that's the main message. And that makes also your message powerful. Any additions on that, Jeremy?
No, I think you said it well. I would just say often for people, the hardest of the 4 criteria to understand is this one about insights or teachable lessons. And I like to think of that as kind of the overriding or philosophy of the solution. So you've got all the details covered, but what's the master plan? How does that work? There's a very good story that we often use about prison reform in Norway. And it's about how prisoners, once they get out of prison in Norway, they end up doing quite well. And a lot of the article focuses on the details of the program. But the overall philosophy sounds simple, but teaching prisoners as human beings, not as kind of animals in a cage, and offering them a lot of opportunities. Obviously, that's easy to do in Norway, where they have a much bigger budget to spend on prisons, but that's kind of the overall philosophy around the response. So I think that's quite important. I also see we got a question to the Q&A. It's about where do you usually find solutions for the problems? Science, experts, comparative analysis, or so on. It's a very good question, one we often hear, and we will be getting into that a little bit later. So if you can just wait, we will certainly touch on that.
Cool. Any questions so far regarding the 4 qualities or anything we touched so far? If not, then we can move on. Often it's really good to actually define by negative examples or like what it isn't. It makes it very clear what solution journalism is, because many people do believe in all good faith that they actually do solutions journalism. And we have several examples that seem to be solution journalism, but in fact they are not. And we will quickly touch why they are not and what could be done differently. So, hero worship. Jeremy, let's start with hero worship.
Yeah, thanks. I touched on this before, but I think this is often confused with solutions journalism. And you might have seen CNN. I'm not sure if they're still doing this, but they did this for many years. The CNN Hero, where they profile someone who's doing amazing things in the world. These are very important people to highlight. We're not saying don't do hero worship stories, because these can also be inspiring, but they're not solutions journalism, because when we're talking about a response and describing that in depth in a solutions journalism piece, we would like that to be a response that can be replicated somewhere else. The details are provided, the limitations, you really understand the response itself. When you do a hero story, usually what happens is it's just profiling the person and often not getting into all the details of their solution. And often it's not possible to replicate, because we know we can't clone people, right? And take them and put them somewhere else in the world. So if the story is too focused on one individual, the reader might end up leaving that story and thinking, this couldn't work anywhere else. It really only works because that person has been such an inspiration behind the idea. So instead of that, as I said all the way at the beginning of this talk, it's perfectly fine to use characters to talk about change, to have people in your story who are inspiring, but you don't only do that. You're really talking about the change which they have undertaken to make a difference.
Yes, actually, characters are carriers, right? You show what they do, not how they are, not their personal qualities, but what they are doing is actually the true hero of the story. Another imposter or fake solutions journalism is called Silver Bullet. That's the story about lifesavers, right? Like about things that are magical remedy to all the trouble. This is an example of a undestroyable ball, but the lead to the story is actually sometimes a soccer ball is more than just a ball. Sometimes it's a lifesaver. And now consider the language. It's quite pathetic, and we actually know it's not. Yeah, a ball is not a lifesaver. A ball is a ball, but it can help. So how can you do it differently? Well, you can tone down the rhetoric. You can care about the language, and you can focus on how this ball is actually helping the kids from the poorest neighborhoods, and what is the technique of the solution. How the ball is actually changing their life. Jeremy, do you want to continue with think tanks?
Sure, yeah. So the other thing not to be confused about are simply theories. So often think tanks, which again are very important, we're not saying get rid of think tanks, but many times think tanks are looking and comparing various policies and then making recommendations. So in this case, it's not a theory about something that might work, but something that's already in progress, already showing results. It doesn't always have to be something at a later stage. It can be something already that's showing some results, but still at an early stage. You would just say that in an article. It's something where you might simply say early results are promising, but we don't know in the long run if this will have the desired impact. But it's something, no matter what, it's always in progress or already showing very optimistic results.
Remember the definition? One of the keywords was existing responses. So I call it, it's not should be done journalism. It's not about what can be done or should be done. It's not about possible policies. It's about what is already happening in the world. And one of the favorite ones is activism. It's very easy to slip to activism with solutions journalism. But if you stick to the 4 qualities we addressed, and if you do rigorous reporting, you can bring positive information or constructive information, but still you would do good reporting, because then you are focusing on how the response works and you don't do conclusions. It's actually very important that you present facts. You collect the data, you collect the voices, but you let the reader or the audience to conclude whether this is something I want, I like, and I want to push for or not. Because, well, in fact, it doesn't really matter what you think as a reporter when doing reporting. Because you should let the facts speak. So it's not about telling your audience what should they do, like demand Congress to, for instance, those examples are about education and fees for education. Instead of telling your audiences to, demand Congress to do something, how about if you present a place that actually doesn't have tuition for schools? They don't have actually fees for schools, and how it works. And then it's up to me as a reader to actually decide based on the facts you presented, whether this is something that I actually appreciate and see a value in. And again, how to prevent activism. Tone down your voice, or like don't overclaim. It's not about the perfect solution. And also focus on the weak parts. Don't forget the limitations. Then it will make it rigorous and not activism. And honestly, journalists are very often afraid that they will be accused of activism if they don't know the methodology of solutions journalism. This should keep you safe, actually. Good. So Jeremy, why to do solutions journalism?
So I hope by now we've shown you enough evidence and explained enough of the details to understand that this is the type of reporting that can really carry much greater impact. Because again, just writing about problems, occasionally something will change, but it doesn't happen that often. With this type of reporting, you're really describing concrete responses to social problems with the hope that others might adapt those solutions, might mobilize around those solutions. We've seen it happen in a number of places where a story will come out and people will just get frustrated. They will think, wow, here's a response. Someone else is doing it. It's working. Why aren't we doing the same thing? And that kind of pressure and activism around a concrete response can sometimes lead to change. It's not always going to lead to change, but there's a better chance that it will than only writing about the problem every single time and not mentioning any kind of light at the end of the tunnel, any kind of working solution.
Yep.
So to continue, this is just good journalism. I think it's something which a lot of us who got into journalism, we wanted to have impact. We wanted to change things. And this is traditionally high quality journalism that does things the right way. It's not superficial coverage. It's not activism. It's just good journalism. And just very quickly, we can talk about this in the questions if you're interested, or at one of the following workshops. But the data has really shown that audiences like this type of journalism. It increases engagement. It makes them more likely to trust the different media outlets that are practicing it, because it really looks like the media is looking out for their problems. It's not just trying to dig up dirt or write about corruption and nothing else, but also present solutions to make society a better place. And readers traditionally appreciate that, and they feel much more like the media is telling the full story. It can also increase revenue. These types of articles also tend to be read more often, tend to encourage people to come back. And in terms of increasing revenue, not just advertising, but also sponsorship. There are a lot of solutions journalism outlets around the world, media, that have been able to find donors who like to sponsor this type of journalism, also because it suggests how to make the world a better place.
Thank you, Jeremy. Any questions here, or can we move on? I don't see any in question and answer session, so let's move on. We have a few examples for you, not many, but some of them are from Central Europe, and some of them, the first one is from France, but it's a very nice case study. And actually, we wanted to show you that you can do solution journalism at several levels of your newsroom strategy or policy. Médiacités is a local news outlet in France, and it's a membership-based newsroom. And at the beginning of the COVID, like back in spring, they were thinking, what can we do to serve our community better? They actually found out by surveying their audience and asking people around that people are very much interested in responses to COVID, responses to the challenges, and what can be done about it. So they actually implemented solutions strategy or solutions approach to their newsroom practice. So far, they did 14 solution stories. Before they were actually focusing on investigations, and now they turned them also, not only, but also into solutions investigations. They also encouraged and engaged their audiences by asking them what they are interested in. What can we investigate for you? And they actually received a very good feedback and very good audience response, and also it translated into their revenue, as Jeremy was mentioning. If you want to learn more about this case, I would like to invite you to Prague Media Conference, this time virtual, where we will have Pierre Libovici, who is from Médiacités, and he will be talking about their experience in person. So you are very welcome to join this or any other keynote. And if you want to read the case study about how exactly or what all they did in response to COVID-19, there is a link, and I will share the slides with you later on, so then you can go to the case study that was done by European Journalism Center. Good, and Nicole is sharing the link for registration for Prague Media Point. Prague Media Point is actually, the general admission is for free, so that's great news. So feel free to register. Jeremy, how about the Hungarian case?
Yeah, I think we've got two stories here that focus on elderly people or senior citizens. One is in Hungary and one is in Bosnia. These are just excellent stories. This one specifically related to COVID, how many elderly people, we know everywhere, but this is specifically about Hungary, how they were feeling isolated, depressed, obviously, during the lockdown in Hungary. And this was a program that sprung up, volunteers, younger people that would call up the seniors and engage them in discussion. There were hundreds of calls made. Many volunteers, young people expressed interest, and it kind of, again, too early to show impact in terms of studying the mental health condition of older people, but anecdotally, and you can see that in this story, it did show a lot of impact, connecting older people to the outside world, and kind of a stand-in for their own grandkids, if they had any, but providing a strong bond between the younger and the older generation.
Besides that, you also learned how the practical part of it was organized. You know, they also take care of safety, that they actually had a very strict policy about connecting those people online and offline, which was not actually allowed. So to really protect the seniors from like strangers. A very inspirational story, and I really believe such program can actually work in any of the countries, and help still only seniors to get connected. And we have also an example from the Czech Republic. Unfortunately, we don't have the English translation yet, but soon to come. This is about how to actually deal with our mental health during the lockdown. And this article is actually a piece of students. It's students article. It's from Solutions Journalism course at Charles University in Prague. And they actually found that teletherapy, like therapy in distance, is a response that helps. It has its gaps, it has its limitations, but a lot of people who need therapy or are going regularly to therapy, and now suddenly they couldn't just go and visit their therapist, found a way or found a solution in joining through either video conference or a call or a phone. And the article actually describes how teletherapy works. It's based on telemedicine, what's the experience so far, what are the pros and what are the cons, because it's also not suited for everyone and not for every situation. Sometimes no therapy is better than just like halfway therapy or like not a personal therapy. So this article is very thorough in explaining how it works, how it helps, but also where it doesn't help. Good, and then one non-COVID story, but we really like it. It's one of the recent ones on our website as well. And we thought that we would like to share this with you because it's from the region and it's a wonderful example that solution journalism can be done everywhere and about any topic. So Jeremy.
Yeah, I won't go into the details, but this is about a community center in the Bosnian city of Zenica, which talks about how a group of older people, senior citizens, who had only been meeting to exchange tips about painting and over coffee, and how within a couple years, this became a very vibrant cultural community center in the city and went from, I think, around 30 members to over 100. And a whole range of different activities were launched beyond just painting, involving also younger people, even international partners, and ended up having, or is having, a lot of impact on the community. There's a small part of it about the effect of COVID on their activities and how they've started up online classes for some of the seniors, but not a lot of detail. That wasn't the main idea of the article. But again, enough detail about what they're doing, enough inspiration to think that this could be adapted somewhere else. And in fact, even from abroad, they were coming to hear more about this example.
Good. So we are reaching the final part of our webinar. There was already the question related to this. So how to do solutions journalism? It's not a rocket science, first of all, but there are some good tips or good things to consider before you jump and decide you are going to do solution story. So first you need to identify the issue or question of concern, the problem you want to actually address in the first place. And then you are asking what's missing from the public conversation, because maybe we need more information about the problem in the first place. Maybe we need information about what can be done about it. And that's what you need to find. And I will speak about it in a second. And once you decide this, then you go and start hunting candidates. So quite a good guidance about whether or not is the right moment for solutions journalism, because it's not always the right moment. And it's also good to bear in mind, is to ask yourself a question. Is there enough information about the problem? If not, then probably you might need to explain the problem in the first place, especially if it's a not well-known problem, or maybe a problem that's very sensitive and taboo problem, you know, like a thing that needs more context before you actually jump to the solution. Why? Because if people don't know there is a problem, they are not interested in reading about solutions, right? However, what if we know there is a problem? We have read it a million times and we know it, but actually we don't know much about what to do about it. Or maybe, maybe we even know what to do about it. And then what can be done? When in this moment, you actually need to keep pressuring and you need to do the watchdog, right? Because if you know what's the problem and you know what can be done about it or what should be done about it, then you need to keep pressure. However, and I believe there are two reasons why changes are not happening. The first is there is lack of political or goodwill. Yeah, that's the first case. So we know what to do, but nothing is happening. But the second is that often change is not happening because those in charge simply don't know what to do about it. And this is actually very, very simple and very humane, right? So there is not really too much of bad intention, but simply lack of ideas, lack of inspiration, lack of strategy, lack of knowledge. And if this is your case, so we know what's the problem, but basically we don't know much what to do about it. You as journalist, you can play a significant role for your community in investigating about what can be done about it, what has been done elsewhere, and bringing this information back to your community and challenging those in power for non-action can have a similar impact like investigative reporting, as the watchdog reporting, as we discussed. So it can really change policies, it can change situations in people's lives. So if this is the case, that's the right moment. So yes, we know what's the problem, we don't know what to do about it, but we need to investigate it. That's the moment for solutions journalism. And then the key question for you as a reporter to ask is, who is doing it better That's actually the very first question. But then there are a few more questions that might be useful. So over to Jeremy.
Yes, and this is gets back to the question we had in the Q&A. How do you start looking even, and where do you find the solutions? So as Lucy said, that's the first question is who's doing it better, and then these other questions flow directly from the 4 criteria that we mentioned at the outset. How does the response work? Where did the idea come from? Is it being replicated? What's the impact? What's the research? What do the critics say? How do you measure success? And obviously, in what ways is it working? And what are the limitations? So these are all details that you will have to uncover in putting together the story. But again, the real way to start is simply to look around, and we'll talk about that in a second, of who's doing it better.
You find an area where you are curious about what can be done about it or what has been done already about it. So think tanks or policy experts are a place to go. Academics. I think there is no problem that wouldn't be researched by a PhD student or any, like research department at the universities or whatsoever. So academics are a really great source of information, but they're also problematic. They're not so good in communicating their results. So sometimes you need to kind of go for them. Large data sets are really treasure, and it's tricky because you need to know what you are actually looking for. What kind of information I want to get from the big data set. But you can get useful information about positive deviances, about things that are maybe, performing better than average, or maybe that are improving within the time. And then you are asking about those. People involved in the implementation of a solution, so who are actually doing that, but also people who are involved in the problem. Very often you read about, like programs or solutions, and nobody actually asks the people who benefit from them or actually who are supposed to benefit. Nobody asks the elderly or the kids or the parents, does it actually help? But people involved in the problem are an important source, and you should never forget them. Networks of innovators like Ashoka or similar networks that are actually supporting people who are trying to fix things and who are trying to come up with new ideas, with creative ideas, and who are testing things. They are really usually, way ahead of state institutions, for instance. Innovators are really a wonderful source of inspirational stories. Program offices in foundations that don't need to necessarily link to your own program, but they might be very well, informed about the education or mental health care or senior services or whatever. And you also need a voice that is not directly involved, someone who is having a more distance, but still understands the issue, to comment on your particular solution you picked. Looking for solutions, hold a mirror to your own life. What sucks to you probably sucks to others as well. And if you found or heard of an interesting response, it might be interesting for others too, if it caught your attention. And then there is a wonderful procrastination toy that's called Solution Story Tracker. That's a database of solution stories curated by Solutions Journalism Network. There is more than 10,000 stories by now. And if you enter there a keyword or you filter it by filters in the database, you can find story almost about any topic. So that brings us to the tools. Jeremy, do you want to continue?
Sure. This is a special page on our website. We will put the link also in the chat or send it afterwards, where you can see other resources about related to COVID-19 and solutions journalism, including some things that the Solutions Journalism Network has put together. They have also a dossier on their website where they list various stories related to the pandemic and responses.
Sorry, yeah. So
this is also the toolkit, which can be found in a whole bunch of different languages on the Solutions Journalism Network site, and you can definitely look there for more inspiration and more about the different criteria that we've covered today.
Yeah, we are very proud that there are many Central and Eastern European languages, so it might be easy for you to actually go through that.
Yeah, and then Lucy mentioned this before, the Solutions Tracker actually has more stories, I think, than what's up there already, but there are thousands and thousands of all of these have actually been screened by people on the staff of the Solutions Journalism Network. So you can be assured that these are true solutions stories. They cover the 4 criteria, and it's very easy to search under country, topic, even type of medium. So if you wanted to say find shorter stories, you can find them there. If you want to find videos, you can find them there. So very inspiring, and you might just take a look and find stories from your own country.
And it's also a good source for your initial research. If you pick a topic, check the tracker and see what has been already written about it and how did they approach it, who did they talk to, what questions did they actually address, and so on. Yeah, that's how it looks when you simply ask for keywords. Good. And last but not least, Jeremy, this is not the end, that's just the beginning.
Right. As we mentioned, we started this course up, started off with two webinars, but we are continuing with workshops. So you can see here, session 3, section 4, section 5. I've put in the chat the link. You probably have seen it, but just in case you have not, this is a list of the upcoming workshops, the dates, and the target groups, because we do have some targeted for people in Eastern Europe and some targeted for those in the Western Balkans. And I can assure you these will be very hands-on. We will have you doing exercises. I know today can tend to be a lot. We've gone through it fairly quickly. Hopefully you have kind of the theory behind solutions journalism, but what we will do in the practical workshop session 4 is really getting into the details of how you practice it, how you write the stories, and even hopefully either at that session or the follow-up, also hear the kind of ideas you have and give you some feedback on that. Really, no matter where you look, you can definitely find solution stories. And I think one thing, again, to keep in mind, it doesn't have to be entire society's response in terms of education or health or anything like that. It can really be the response of one NGO, one hospital, one school, which is showing impact. So you can definitely think small to start with, and in some ways that even works best, because sometimes if you aim too high and too broad, you end up not being able to convey the details which are so important to the story.
Yes, so we look forward to seeing you in other sessions as well. But meanwhile, we have also a quick homework for you until the next session at least. And after all you have heard here, is there a story you have done yourself or you just read and now you think it would actually benefit it from solutions angle, or you would be curious about what's next? So now I know what's the problem, but what is being done about it? Think about that and bring this idea to our next session, and we can quickly discuss what topics are actually of interest to you. So that would be for today. Now is space for your questions, but this is not the only moment. I just want to stress that we will share the slides with you, with all the links, also with all the links to the stories we were referring to today. And if you have any question meanwhile, you can always get in touch with us, emailing us, and we are here for you. But anyway, if there are any questions right now, then please go ahead. And I think there is some. Yeah, yeah, there is a maybe rather a comment that, and I believe that that gets back to the data that, for instance, air quality index, and most of the people don't know how to read the measurements of pollution, when it's dangerous for your health and so on. Exactly, because figures are not information. Data is data, and only the context makes it information. And then if you make it a constructive info, or if you put it into a context of a solution, then it's constructive, right? So totally, I totally agree. Well,
it does. Yeah, it does seem like we're out of questions, but we thank you very much for attending. I guess just a few points. As we said, the Prague Media Point Conference, which starts next week, you're all cordially invited. Please spread the word. There are over 30 panels. Some of them are related to solutions journalism, and we would invite all of you to participate. Again, we have workshops also continuing next week. There's not just the Solutions Journalism Network, but a workshop run by our colleague Jaroslav Valuch that deals with covering disinformation related to the pandemic, how to write about it, publish it, circulate it, and so on. And then finally, I would just like to thank the donors who supported the production of this webinar, and also the course, which is the Central Europe Initiative, National Endowment for Democracy, and the U.S. Embassy in Kiev. So that's it from me. Lucy, do you want to add anything, any parting words of wisdom?
No, I just want to say thank you for being patient with us. It took 1.5 hours, which is a lot for a webinar. I know, and it's a lot. So I hope you will have opportunity to digest it. And if you have any questions, please reach out to us. We are here for you.